my camera's gonna die, so we're gonna see how well I can record this, how fast I can record it, or how good my battery is, and if it's actually gonna last or not. Sitting here, I'm cozy. I've got my should not have put it that far away. My little lavender coffee here. If you have never had lavender coffee, it's like my favorite thing ever. It's so good. I love it. And yeah, so we're just gonna go through a little bit about uncomfortable emotions. I think someone requested this once upon a time. I've had it on my list of topics to talk about for ages. And it was scheduled for this week, so we're talking about it. I have had plenty of experiences with uncomfortable emotions, so I feel like this is something that I can talk about a lot in terms of just personal experience, and also I've had a lot of counseling, a lot of therapy on this, and also in terms of looking at just the brain side of it and my education in neuroscience. I think that I have a pretty well-rounded idea of it, even though it's not great. It's not like amazing. I'm not a medical professional. I am an undergraduate student who has not graduated yet, so just keep that in mind. But yeah, so getting into it, uncomfortable emotions are uncomfortable as they sound, right? And when something's uncomfortable, I feel like it is human nature, our tendency to run away from it, right? Because no one wants to be feeling this emotion. No one, if it's uncomfortable, of course you don't want to be feeling it. Like, if you have the option to run away from it or do something else, it is a short-term way of kind of keeping that emotion under control and not having to deal with it. Because I think what scares us is that dealing with the emotion or recognizing the emotion is going to make it more uncomfortable. I had a counselor tell me once when I was dealing with a lot of panic attacks. That is something that I don't think I've talked about on here, but I do struggle with medical panic attacks. And I mean anxiety attacks occasionally as well. But in that emotion or in that moment when I'm dealing with a panic attack that often comes out of nowhere, just completely unexpected, what makes it worse is when I do not accept it or when I am trying to run away from it. So usually if my panic attack starts, I'm able to realize like, okay, something is happening. This is uncomfortable. I don't like this. I need to stop it. And that is when it actually gets worse. So of course, take this with a grain of salt. In situations where it's like, oh, I'm dealing with an uncomfortable emotion and I'm in a situation where I don't really have the time to deal with it. Like, if it's like, okay, I need to keep it at bay for an hour or something, like in that situation, it depends, on your specific situation, if that's going to work from you, but it's not the worst thing to be like, hey, I'm going to push this away for an hour and then I'll pay attention to it later. Or if you ruminate a lot, like I do, sometimes I will kind of distract myself and try and push it away. So then I can come back to it later when I'm not ruminating, and be in a more like wise mind. I've talked about that before, but I'm going to talk about it again. So your wise mind is this kind of center place of your emotion mind, which is at one end of the spectrum, which is things like, anxiety, fear, worry, even, could be maybe something that is a positive emotion like joy, excitement, anything like that. And your logical mind is this part of your mind where, your emotions are not in any sort of, like, they're not making any difference in your process. So maybe it's like, thinking from your head instead of your heart, like being like, okay, hey, like, this is the logical thing to do, so I'm going to do this, and maybe not paying attention to what your feelings might be telling you or what other people's feelings might be telling you or things like that. So that is, there's the emotion mind and the logical mind. And in between is the wise mind, where you're paying attention to both, but neither is really like taking priority. And that is where we want to be. And there's different areas on the spectrum depending on the situation. Like, it's not like bad to be in your emotion mind. Like, we feel emotions. Feeling emotions are good. But sometimes our emotions can be so big that they make other things more difficult. So that's where, when you're dealing with an uncomfortable emotion, it's important to have the option to kind of just like take a step back and be in your wise mind. So that's sometimes why, if I'm ruminating on something, instead of continuing to process it, I will, very consciously do something to distract myself, even if it's just as simple as watching a show or going out with friends, because I know that right now I am in my emotion mind and I am not able to get to my wise mind easily. So I'm going to do something to distract myself, because that will kind of bring me out of my emotion mind a little and back towards that wise mind that I want to be in. So all of that aside, I think that is something that is important to understand, is that our emotions are not necessarily bad, but they can, pushing them off can make them worse. Doesn't always, but it can maybe make it a little bit more difficult. For example, when I was dealing with these panic attacks, what my counselor actually told me was to let myself get a panic attack, which I'm not saying that this is what you should do if you experience this, but in my specific situation, actually letting myself get that panic attack made it better, because your emotions don't actually, like, the height of your emotions don't always actually last very long. And sometimes what makes them last longer is if you are pushing them off, if you're pushing them away. So I actually let myself get a panic attack, or let myself stress, as long as it wasn't dangerous, and was able to kind of get back to kind of my wise mind a little. And the reason why this is, and I mean, I'm sure there's multiple reasons, but one thing that I had read a few years back that changed everything for me when I'm dealing with an uncomfortable emotion is about crying. When you cry, it actually releases endorphins in your body. It releases a bunch of different chemicals from your body, and it helps your body kind of get back to a clean slate, if that makes sense. So, like, I mean, I think we've all had, maybe had the experience of, you cry and it makes you feel better. But of course, crying has such this, like, struggling in general, but especially crying, like, it has this view in society of like, oh, it's bad, oh, it's weak. And that's not true. Like, crying is your body's natural process to dealing with emotions. So, like, I think it's actually so important. Like, people who are able to cry when they need to, I admire. I really, really admire that, because it's something that is so important to do, because it's allowing your body to let go and release all of the stress and all of the chemicals coming from that, and just kind of relax a little. And the different ways that you cry release different chemicals. So if you're crying happy tears, it's going to release different chemicals than if you're crying sad tears. It's not going to be exactly the same, because your body is literally releasing all that you are feeling. So when you're feeling an uncomfortable emotion and you're like, let your body release it. And of course, this is easier said than done, but it's something that I think just knowing that really changed it for me in the way that I do that. But aside from crying, just dealing with uncomfortable emotions in general, it's not easy and it's not fun. But we've all also been there before, and so you're not alone. That doesn't make it necessarily go away, but I think that knowing that can be really helpful. At least for me, it has been. So in terms of actually dealing with an uncomfortable emotion, first off, knowing that sometimes pushing it away makes it worse or could make it worse, and knowing that it does not make you weak for feeling a difficult emotion or for showing emotion. It doesn't make you weak. And then also looking at, I think, other things that have helped me. Again, distraction, being surrounded by people. I'm going to be completely honest, while I am recording this episode, I have been apartment hunting, found an amazing place, was about to sign, and then some plans fell through, and I kind of feel like I'm at square one again right now. So I've definitely been dealing with some really uncomfortable feelings and emotions and just like things that I'm not used to right now. And I think for me, the things that have helped me the most is I've been trying to stay positive, which again, like you're not always going to be able to stay positive on it, but trying to just keep doing what I can and knowing that like, hey, maybe this isn't necessarily in my control. Like the reason why things kind of fell through was not in my control. And instead of trying to find things to blame or trying to fix things that aren't in my control, it is easier for me to just recognize like, okay, what is in my control right now? What is in my control is the fact that I am able to still look at places. I just found a place that might be promising, but within a few minutes I could hear back from them and it completely goes down the drain again. Like, it's been uncomfortable. It's been stressful. I'm supposed to move in a month. Yeah. Maybe 2 months. I could push it to 2 months, but really I can't do more than that. So it is stressful, and that is one of the uncomfortable emotions that I've been dealing with lately. And I think taking it step by step, moment by moment, knowing that sometimes life will just kind of figure it out for you. Sometimes time will just figure it out for you. And in that moment, while you're waiting, just doing the best that you can, and then just being easy on yourself, taking it easy, not being too hard on yourself, not being like crazy about it or anything, and giving yourself the grace that you need to just, be. It's okay to be feeling uncomfortable. It's okay to be dealing with difficult emotions. It's okay to be, if you need to spend a few hours in bed watching TV and just feeling a little bit lost, like, there's no one telling you you can't do that. It's okay. You might need to do that, and we've all done it at one point or another, right? Sometimes that's just what you need. And I think, especially in the way that just life is, I don't know, maybe this is just something that I think, but like I feel like there's just so much of a hustle culture that we don't understand the importance of even knowing what our emotions are and recognizing them. Like, if you need to get a counselor, get a counselor. I think everyone should have a counselor, whether they have mental health struggles or not. If you need to take a day off, take a day off. If you need to just spend a little bit of extra time in bed in the morning, like, do it. We have so much of a hustle culture, at least in the US, and I think around the world quite a bit. And, I can't speak to that since I've never lived anywhere else for a long period of time, but we do have such a big hustle culture just like in life. I think I definitely struggle with feeling like I always need to be productive. If I've done as much as possible in one day and I still feel like, okay, now I have a moment to relax, I need to go do something productive instead. Like, that happens to me all the time, and it's stressful. And you don't always need to be productive. I've been really embracing the like slow living lately, and that is one thing that I've been trying to embrace is like, I don't need to be very productive. I'm hoping that if apartment plans do work out, I'll be having my cat with me over the summer next year, and she'll be able to stay with me now, which is really nice, because that is one thing that I notice is that every time I go home with my family, if I'm bored, I just end up like, instead of being on my phone or instead of just like doing something like that, like I just go find her and I just snuggle with her, or I play with her for a little bit, things like that. And so that's what I've been trying to embrace lately, is when I'm dealing with an uncomfortable emotion, doing something away from technology and either hanging out with other people, or if you can't do that, hanging out with something else, or doing something that kind of heals your inner self. Like yesterday, I was really stressed about all of this apartment stuff, actually. And so, I went to my closet and I pulled out this like painting that I hadn't worked on for almost a year now. And I just took it out and started painting. It's like a paint by number, and it was so relaxing. So sometimes it's things like that that have helped me before, and having that option to just exist and be the person that I am, without any distractions or anything going on, just being myself. And yeah, sometimes that's the best I can do. If it's summer, I like to go outside. If it's, I think just give yourself love. When you're dealing with an uncomfortable emotion, I think that's one of the most important things you can do, because if you're being hard on yourself, the emotions are going to be harder. That is, I think, a little bit of my advice for uncomfortable emotions. I feel like I didn't do that much to help in terms of this, because no, I can't just make it go away, right? I wish I could. I would if I could, but I can't. So sometimes when I'm doing this, I'm like, am I really actually helping anyone? But I think also just listening to it, sometimes having someone to listen to kind of talk you through it is helpful. So I'm hoping this was helpful. I am sending so many hugs. Make sure to like and subscribe, and comment ways that you help yourself when you're dealing with uncomfortable emotions. And I'll see you next time.